Week 17 of the fantasy football season, and here's tight end starts its every matchup this week. First matchup Thursday night, New York Jets at the Cleveland Browns. Tyler Conklin, I know he's been the number 2 target in this passing game all season, but right now, the last couple weeks, the numbers really haven't been there for Tyler Conklin. This Jet offense has been a mess for the most part, even though I know last week they put up 30 points in that one. That was an easier matchup versus the Commanders. So this week in a tough matchup at the Cleveland Browns, I don't see Conklin doing much. He's a sit. David Njoku, the last month of the season, ever since Joe Flacco has been the starting quarterback for this team, he's putting up big numbers. He's finding the end zone, and he's been a top 5 tight end the last month. So this week, even in a tougher matchup versus a good Jet defense, he's a start this week. Detroit Lions at the Cowboys, only Saturday game this week here. Sam Laporta, what a rookie season it's been for him. He's making all the plays. He's a matchup problem for most safeties and linebackers. And this week here versus the Dallas Cowboy team, where they've been middle of the pack versus the tight end this season, I think Laporta could go out there once again, and he's a must-start tight end. Jake Ferguson, a start for me as well. I know the last few weeks, Jake Ferguson's numbers haven't been all that great for this Dallas Cowboy team and fantasy owners, but he's still the number 2 target, in my opinion, in this offense for this Dallas Cowboy team, behind CeeDee Lamb, then him, and then Brandon Cooks. And Jake Ferguson, he's been better at home anyway this season than on the road. This Cowboy team as a whole, they've scored way more points at home than they have on the road, and Ferguson's numbers and splits are way better as well. Tennessee Titans at the Houston Texans. Chig Okonkwo, the last month of the season, he's really come on and he's making plays, and we saw that towards the end of last season. Okonkwo was putting up fantasy points, and last week 18 fantasy points in PPR leagues. But this week here versus the Houston Texans, he's a borderline option as Okonkwo. We don't know if it's going to be Will Levis or Ryan Tannehill once again at quarterback for this Titan team, but Okonkwo, he's definitely an athletic tight end. He could go out there and make the plays, a pretty solid route runner. But this week, I still don't trust him 100% in a big game for fantasy owners. He's borderline Dalton Schultz to start in this one. It's been a good season here for Dalton Schultz, and it's a good matchup as well with the Tennessee Titans all year. Trouble guarding the pass. We've seen receivers have big games all season. We've seen tight ends put up solid numbers, and this week, once again, Dalton Schultz in PPR leagues. He's usually good, anywhere from 8 to 10 fantasy points as his floor. So this week, I think he goes out there versus weak Tennessee secondary and middle of the field crew and has a good game. Atlanta Falcons at the Bears. So Kyle Pitts, he's been a good tight end when he actually has a quarterback that can drive the football down the field and get him the ball. And that's what we saw last week with Taylor Heineke, hitting him on a nice pass, and Pitts found the end zone. So this week here, I think Kyle Pitts could go out there. Ball game for this Atlanta Falcon team. He's been an up and down tight end, I know, is Kyle Pitts. But like I said, he's a playmaker, and now what Heineke at least could get him the football in some good plays. He's a start. Jonnu Smith, he's a sit for me in this game. I know Jonnu Smith's had some good moments this season at the tight end position, and this Falcon team likes to run a lot of 2 tight end sets, and Smith's been a decent receiving tight end this season. After the last couple years with the Patriots, he didn't do much, but this week he's a sit. Is Jonnu Smith. Consistency the last 6 weeks really hasn't been there, where he only had 2 ball games with double-digit fantasy points in the last 6 weeks is Jonnu Smith. So this week, I know it's a decent matchup at the Bears, where their defense isn't all that great, but he's a sit. Now to the Bears, Cole Kmet is a starter. We know Cole Kmet, he got hurt and left that game for the Chicago Bears in last week's matchup. So if Kmet's back in this game, he's a star. We know this Falcon defense, I know they're middle of the pack, but versus the tight end, they've given up fantasy points, and players have had good games. So if Kmet comes back this week, he's a start. And if not, Robert Tonyan gets the call for this Bear team. And Robert Tonyan, he's had some decent games with the Green Bay Packers over the last few seasons, but this week, especially in a big week for fantasy owners in the playoffs and obviously the championship in most leagues, Robert Tonyan is a sit for me in this ball game. Miami Dolphins at the Baltimore Ravens. Durham Smythe a sit in this one. I know Smythe, he had a good ball game last week in one of the best games of his career, with Tua was working in the middle of the field and Smythe was getting open and making plays versus the Dallas Cowboys. But this week he's a sit. Is Durham Smythe. Isaiah Likely is a start for me in this ball game. Isaiah Likely, the solid tight end, and this Raven team likes him a lot, obviously. So right here, he's gone out there, Isaiah Likely. He's making plays, catching the football yards after catch. And Lamar Jackson definitely has confidence in him. So this week, once again, in a potential shootout, he's a start. New Orleans Saints at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Taysom Hill, he was putting up numbers for weeks on end, but the last 2-3 weeks, we really haven't seen much out of Taysom Hill. And this week, no way, in a big matchup, I could trust them. They went more back to a traditional offense is this New Orleans Saints team. And Taysom Hill this week at the tight end position to sit Juwan Johnson. I know the last 2 weeks he's found the end zone twice, but if he hasn't scored those touchdowns, pretty much the targets and the fantasy points haven't been there. So this week in a matchup versus Tampa Bay, with their linebacking crew and safeties have definitely improved. To sit in this one, Cade Otton, he'll have a solid game here and there, but for the most part, consistency hasn't been key as well for Cade Otton this season. So this offense is built around Mike Evans, Rachaad White out of the backfield, and Chris Godwin as well starting to get things going. So Otton this week, I know it's a decent matchup as a sit New England Patriots at the Buffalo Bills in this ball game. Hunter Henry, we'll see if he returns from the knee injury, but even if he does, it's a tough matchup versus a Bill defense over the last few weeks where they're starting to get things going and starting to kick things into gear. I know Hunter Henry's had some good games this season with Bailey Zappa quarterback, but this week I don't see Henry doing much even if he plays. He's a sit. Mike Gesicki scored a touchdown last week for this New England Patriot team, but even if Hunter Henry's out, it's tough for fantasy owners to go out there and trust Gesicki, especially in an offense that's had trouble scoring pretty much the whole year. Dalton Kincaid, the last 3-4 weeks since they made the offensive coordinator change, his numbers have dropped off big time, no doubt about it, for Dalton Kincaid. So this week, he's a borderline option at best. I know he's got a good upside. I know he's a first-round pick, 26 overall in last season's NFL draft. But like I said, the numbers really haven't been there for Kincaid, and at best, he's borderline. Arizona Cardinals at the Philadelphia Eagles. Trey McBride's a start for me in this game. Trey McBride over the last month and a half of the season, he's been a top 5, top 8 tight end range. Kyler Murray's number 1 target. Even if Hollywood Brown comes back in this game, Trey McBride's the number 1 target in this passing game, I believe. He's a matchup problem in the middle of the field. He's been one of the better college tight ends to come out over the last few seasons. And this week here, I think Trey McBride, once again, versus an Eagle defense that's very vulnerable in the secondary and giving up a lot of points over the last few weeks. He's a start. Dallas Goedert to start as well. And Goddard's coming off one of the best games he's had this season versus the New York Giants. We had 14 fantasy points in PPR league. So Arizona, we know, is a weak defense, and Dallas Goedert's definitely a big part of this offense for Philadelphia. He's a start in this one. Carolina Panthers at the Jacksonville Jaguars. Hayden Hurst, Tommy Trimble, these tight ends really haven't done much this season besides a couple decent games here and there. And Tommy Trimble, for the most part, has been a touchdown or bust type of tight ends at both seats. Evan Ingram is a start for me in this one. Evan Ingram, one of the better tight ends in the league, and a big part of this Jacksonville offense, especially since Christian Kirk's been out for multiple weeks. And obviously, he's out the remainder of the regular season. So Evan Ingram, he can line up anywhere, outside, inside, and he's a good yard after catch player as well. So even if it's CJ Beathard in this one, where Trevor Lawrence left the game last week with a shoulder injury, he's a start. Vegas Raiders at the Indianapolis Colts. Not much going on at the tight end position in this ball game. Michael Mayer is a sit for me in this ball game. We really haven't seen much out of Mayer in his rookie season, besides a couple highlight grabs here and there and a couple decent ball games. But this offense is built still on running the football and around Davante Adams, even though he's coming off a horrible ball game. And Austin Hooper, if he starts, if Michael Mayer can't give it a go in this one, he's a sit. Austin Hooper at this point of his career is a veteran, and he's not really a guy that's going out there and putting up fantasy points for the last few seasons, even when he was starting. So right now, Austin Hooper's a sit. Now to the Colts and Granson, Mo Alley-Cox, they're both sits for me in this ball game. Kyle Granson, one of the best games of his career last week, 5 catches, 62 yards, but that was a lot to do with Michael Pittman not in the lineup. And if Pittman returns, all those targets and those fantasy points are going to go back to Pittman, and Granson pretty much was a touchdown-dependent tight end and a sleeper at best this season, so he's a sit. Mo Alley-Cox a sit as well. He's had a couple touchdowns here and there this season, but we really haven't seen much out of Mo Alley-Cox to have confidence at all to put him in the lineup over the last few seasons. So he's a sit. Los Angeles Rams at the Giants. Tyler Higbee a sit. We really haven't seen much out of Higbee, and he's pretty much the 5th, 6th option overall on this offense, behind Cooper Kupp, behind Puka Nacua, Kyren Williams, DeMarcus Robinson over the last few weeks. And at this point, he's more blocking tight end than anything, and they don't utilize the tight end as much in this Sean McVay offense like they've had in years past. He's a sit. Darren Waller coming off a bad game at the Philadelphia Eagles, and I know with Tyrod Taylor possibly starting at quarterback this week, this offense can move the football a little bit better, because early in the season when Taylor started, this is where this Giant offense arguably was at its best, moving the football and plays down the field. And he's a borderline option, is Darren Waller. He's coming off at 2 catches, 32 yards in last week's ball game, and he's tough to trust. I know it's a home game for New York. I know the Rams defense isn't all that great, but he's still borderline at best. San Francisco 49ers at the Commanders, so the 49ers coming off a bad loss versus the Baltimore Ravens. But George Kittle, he had a solid ball game over 15 fantasy points in that one last week. So this week here, a good matchup versus the Commanders, a defense that don't stop anyone. And George Kittle, he's been a top 5 tight end this season. I know some weeks he's disappeared and it didn't really put up numbers, and then some weeks he's gone out there and had monster games. So this week, George Kittle in a plus matchup, and this 49er team trying to bounce back is a start. Logan Thomas is sit in this one. I know Thomas found the end zone, but besides that, the last month, he hasn't done much as Logan Thomas, where the numbers haven't been there, the targets haven't been there. We don't know if it's going to be Howell or Jacoby Brissett 100% in this game, but Thomas is a sit. Pittsburgh Steelers at the Seattle Seahawks. Pat Freiermuth, he came back a few weeks ago. He had that one monster game, and we really didn't see much from Freiermuth ever since, so you can't trust him. And Rudolph most likely in their quarterback. And this Steeler offense has been all over the place this season. We've seen monster games from guys and then games where their offense hasn't done anything at all. So this week here, Pat Freiermuth is a sit in this one. Now to the Seattle Seahawks. Noah Fant is a sit. Big trade piece in the Russell Wilson deal a few seasons ago. But Fant, for the most part, he's pretty much been a tight end blocking for the most part, and the guy just going out there and running routes, but not putting up fantasy points. But when the offense is built around DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, and Jackson Smith in a big boy, obviously Noah Fant's not going to get many targets and make plays. Colby Parkinson, he's been actually decent, but he's been a touchdown-dependent tight end as well. But Geno Smith has definitely had a good rapport with Parkinson from last season and this season. But even this week, in a big matchup for fantasy owners, he's a sit. Cincinnati Bengals at the Chiefs. Tanner Hudson, he was on a decent roll, putting up fantasy points with 9 or more fantasy points in the 4 out of 5 ball games. Well, Hudson last week didn't do much. This week, a tough matchup versus one of the better defenses in the league in the Kansas City Chiefs. And he's a sit for me, tough to trust. Travis Kelce is start, obviously. But Travis Kelce this season, he definitely lost his step and his numbers have gone down. With TJ Hawkinson is in that number 1 spot in terms of fantasy points at the position. So Travis Kelce's still a great player, but he's been dropping passes over the last few weeks, and just some burst has been missing, in my opinion, for Kelce. Now to the Los Angeles Chargers at the Denver Broncos. Gerald Everett, he's been pretty decent over the last few weeks. Broncos give up the most fantasy points to the tight ends on the season, and Easton Stick, obviously a young quarterback, and young quarterbacks, I've always mentioned it in my video, like to target the tight end. So this week here, I think Gerald Everett could go out there once again, have a decent ball game. Like I said, Denver gives up the most fantasy points to tight ends on the season, and Everett the last few weeks in PPR league, 8 or more fantasy points 5 weeks in a row at Denver in a good matchup. I think he goes out there and has a good game once again. Now to the Broncos, Adam Troutman is a sit for me as well. We've seen in occasional games here and there where he's gone out there and scored touchdowns as Troutman, but he really hasn't done much of the season. He's a sit. Lucas Kroll found the end zone last week for the Broncos, but he's not really a tight end that's going to be on the fantasy radar. And a guy obviously you're going to count on in a big situation, he's a sit. And then the final game of the week, Green Bay Packers at the Minnesota Vikings. Tucker Kraft, he's been a surprising tight end this season for this Green Bay Packer team, especially the last month of the year, double-digit fantasy points every week in PPR leagues. So he's a start. Him and Jordan Love have a good rapport. And I like this offense this season with Jordan Love spreading the football out. And he's playing with a lot of young guys. So Tucker Kraft this week is a start. And now to the Vikings, TJ Hawkinson, it doesn't look like he's going to play, but if he does in this game, he's a start for me. One of the best tight ends, if not the best tight end in fantasy football this season. He's a matchup problem. He could go out there, run all the routes, make all the plays. He's a big target as well, so this week, he's a start. And if he don't play, Josh Oliver is going to be the starting tight end most likely for this Viking team. And he's a sit. Josh Oliver last week coming in after Hawkinson went out with injury, had a catch for 33 yards in that one. But this offense is built around Justin Jefferson and Nick Mullins. He's a quarterback that's a gunslinger and really likes getting that football down the field. So this week, Oliver, if he's the starter, is a sit. Tight end start sits every matchup for Week 17 of the fantasy football season.